Now I'm going to make a few comments on Cymbeline, um, and although I've skipped a few plays, such as All's Well That Ends Well as You Like It, The Comedy of Errors, Coriolanus. Um, I, this is the most recent one, and I've got it pretty well in my head, so I wanted to just get it out there. There are some pretty obvious themes here that I think are worth paying attention to. Um, Obviously, a lot of the main story has to do with Cymbeline's daughter, who decides, uh, her name is Imogen. Um, she falls in love with this guy, Posthumus, which I find his name funny, um, who is not of the level that her parents, I mean that yeah that her parents like. So her father, Cymbeline, the king of Britain, uh, basically, banishes this guy, Posthumus, and tells his daughter, she can't marry him, that she's got to marry someone better, and in fact, she's trying to get him to marry his son-in-law, um, son of Cymbeline's wife, the queen, uh, and the son's name is Cloten. Anyways, so it's notable, how important status is in this play. The status of this guy, Posthumus Leonatus, even though he's, a member, he has a long family and apparently, a proud family, but they're not up to the standards of the king. And So he gets banished, but everyone comments on how great a guy he is. He's very important. Uh, he's not important, but he's so honorable and so noble that uh, everyone who talks about him, for the most part, just comments on how noble he is. Um, Another interesting thing, um, in the play, and I've spoken about this before with Antony and Cleopatra. This is another play where everyone is, well, most of the characters are high up in like the social strata. So Posthumus, even though he's not the level of a princess, he has his own his own uh, assistant or guide, Philario. Uh, he's like knave is the word that's often used in Shakespeare's plays to describe these people. Um, they seem to do the bidding of someone else, I guess for money, but also because in a way it increases their own social status because they, by being the servant of someone who's above them, is able to interact with other people and to be of service and to have some kind of relationship with other people other than um, people of their own status. Um, Yes, I think it's a very interesting aspect of the play, of Shakespeare's work in general and of that time is, the caste system and how important it was for people uh, to have their proper role, to play their proper role. Um, Another thing in this play is Cymbeline's daughter Imogen. Um, so she falls in love with this guy Posthumus, and she's punished pretty severely for it because her father, is just so offended for whatever reason. The guy's really stuck up on this issue, and so she runs away. I'm trying to recall why she runs away. Um, oh yeah, indeed. Uh, I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily want to give too much of the play away, as this is more of a commentary than a synopsis. Um, but her not wanting to marry this guy Cloten, um, and the drama that ensues while Posthumus is away. He goes to Italy, where apparently the women are very noteworthy. And and this guy Posthumus makes a deal with Yakimo. Uh, oh, so it's not Philario earlier. I messed up. Cymbeline's. I mean, Posthumus. His knave is. Oh, here we go. Pisanio. Okay, pardon. So, as it were, um, this guy Yakimo, who Cymbeline runs into, I mean, who Posthumus runs into in Italy, uh, who also has heard of how honorable and noble this guy is, and he's also heard of like this great, powerful love that he has for this princess for which he was banished, decides to make this wager, and so the wager is essentially, in attempting to prove to Posthumus that Imogen, his woman, is not as pure as he thinks she is, and in a way to kind of to try to punish him simply for being so honorable. Um, uh, and so she runs away because she uh, gets, well, she's taken by Pisanio, Posthumus' um, assistant or knave or whatever, his servant. Um, he takes her to a forest because um, Yakimo essentially convinces Posthumus that he slept with his woman, Imogen, and that she was, untrue to him and that she cuckolded him. Well, uh, this is an interesting thing. Like the importance of someone's purity seems to come up a lot in these plays. I mean, of course, particularly women. It's men seem to be given much more leeway, although they are sometimes punished or reprehended for being um, very sexually active. But the women, it's very important, and then I think they call them maidens. I think is the term that they use to describe a virgin. They don't. I mean, they use it. He uses the word virgin sometimes in his work, but he doesn't use it very often. And usually they're called maidens, I think, or something along those lines, as it were. Um, when she runs away, she decides, um, because she wants to go. Um, I don't know what exactly, but she was being sent to meet up with Caius Lucius, who was a Roman general. And the Roman general was in Britain essentially because he was trying to extort money out of the British monarchy, in return for continued goodwill between Britain and the Roman Empire. Um, so Pisanio tells Imogen, uh, basically to go find this guy. So he's a good friend of, of Posthumus. Um, she dresses up as a boy. She disguises herself, and this seems to be something of a common occurrence. Is these girls uh, dressing up like boys? It also occurred in As You Like It. It was also a pretty big theme in that, where a young woman pretends to be a young man. And then you have to imagine that in the time of Shakespeare, men were the only ones on stage. So what you have is we have a man whose character is a woman pretending to be a man or a boy, oftentimes a young boy. Um, and that's a bit meta because, you know, play within a play or so there's just something strange about that, about this notion. Obviously, I can imagine that in the play itself, it just would have had the boy would have just dressed normal instead of dressing like a girl. When he was dressing up like a girl, he would probably he would have to rely on the suspension of disbelief. Um, so that the people in the audience would say, okay, well, I know it's a man, but the man's playing a woman. Then when he's playing the woman pretending to be a boy, I imagine it would just dress like a boy as opposed to trying to to do some well I mean see I don't know what they would do in that case. So it'd be interesting to find out a little more about that. Um, as a boy, Imogen, who ends up changing his name, her name. Um, Trying to think of what the name was. She runs a Fideli, and she runs into what turn out to be her two long lost brothers. They were kidnapped as young child, like one of them was a baby and one of them was like 4 or something years old, and kidnapped by someone who was banished by the king. Basically, because I mean, I think it's pretty clear that the king is way overreacting. He's close-minded. He sees things his way, and if you get on his wrong side, he's probably going to banish you or something. That tends to be what he does. Um, So Belarius is the banished lord who's calling himself Morgan, and he took Cymbeline's son, Guiderius and Arviragus. He raised them by the names Polydor and Cadwal. Um, and they take this boy in, um, who's actually their sister, and uh, they come to like this boy very, very much, very, very quickly. And so I get the feeling that they believed that family, even though they didn't recognize each other, that there was something that they could feel each other, they could sense that trust in each other, that even though they didn't know this person, that they could trust them. And and so it came as not so much of a surprise later. I mean, it was a surprise, but it wasn't a shocking surprise when they found out um, that this person they thought was a young boy was actually their sister who they grew up without. Um, but they comment various times like, well, from the moment I met this young boy, I just felt really positively towards him and that I could trust him and that I'd known him a long time. Um, that's interesting. Is there anything else that I really want to say at this time about the Cymbeline? The wager that Posthumus does with Iachimo is basically Iachimo wants to get Imogen's ring, which she gave to Posthumus, and he wears on his pinky, tiny little ring, and he wants to win that, as some sort of, well, since in the end it turns out that Imogen is uh, a good, trustworthy girl, um, you know, essentially it's just to win out on Posthumous. Yakimo just wants to be able to feel, whatever satisfaction one might get uh, from overcoming or outdoing such a good person. He's a good person. He's not. I mean, I'm talking about Posthumous. Posthumous is a good and noble and honest person. Um, and so there's like this evilness to Yakimo. I mean, even though in the end Yakimo, uh, begs forgiveness or whatever, or sees the light and sees that he was wrong this whole time, and that whole thing is a little bit hard to hard to accept. Um, but so that's an interesting notion, and I think it comes up a lot um, in Shakespeare's plays, but maybe I'm wrong. Just this idea of people not liking someone else because of how good they are, not liking how good they are. Um, I mean, because he wasn't necessarily a lucky guy. after all, he was banished from his kingdom and forced essentially never to see his wife again. Although in the end he does see his wife and he gets to live with her, but um, great warrior. He's really notable for being a great warrior and other things. Um, so yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. And I just wanted to note those few things and see how they relate to what else happens in Shakespeare's work.